designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and we are here to encourage, empower, and educate folks in the real estate community and in the real estate profession. My esteemed guest today is Sarah Lyons from Fort Worth, Texas. Say hi, Sarah.
Hi.
And she and I have become good buddies. We met in Boston last year. She was a member of the 2017 class of 30 Under 30, was featured in Realtor Magazine. And so as one of the newer people in our class, she actually, in our class, one of the newer people in our alumni group, she actually came to our reunion just a month after she had been given the recognition by Realtor Magazine. Now she's going to be a panelist on our Working Moms panel at our real estate convention that we're hosting, as well as our reunion. So Sarah, I'm so excited to talk just through several things that make you a successful real estate agent. So I know from preparing for our show that you're married to your husband, Kevin, and you've got sons, Ben and Will. Ben's 8 and Will is 6. But let's go back in time before real estate. Just tell me what you're doing before you got into the real estate industry, how long you've been into it, and why you chose a career in real estate.
So I've been in real estate for just over 4 years now. I started in real estate just out of desperation for needing to pay the bills, honestly. I was a stay-at-home mom from right out of college. My husband got into medical school. 3 years into med school, he decided that he did not want to be a doctor, so we needed a new family plan. There was some therapy involved and some transitioning, but ultimately I asked my mom to get me a Groupon for real estate classes. Decided if I was going to actually put the work in to do it online, then I would have what it takes to do this business. So it took me 4 months doing a little bit every single day. In between nap times, I had a 2-year-old and a baby at that point. Got my license and hit the ground running. Within 6 months, we had my husband home full-time with the kids, so that way I could focus on real estate full-time. We haven't looked back since.
What an amazing story. I didn't know about the Groupon. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah. I think that the tagline for the magazine on mine was "Thanks, Groupon." Yeah.
Yeah. The rest of your career, thanks Groupon for getting your start.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, and so Kevin, you've got an unconventional setup relative to what we're used to seeing. There's a lot of females that are realtors, but a lot of times their husbands are working. And so Kevin stays at home with the boys and actually homeschools, which I think is fascinating. I think it's very, very cool that you guys have that set up. I would imagine that that's probably caused you to have to learn how to do time management, extremely well, because there's probably still some mom duties that you have to do, even though you're the breadwinner, the primary income earner. And then the other part about that is that I'd love to just kind of hear some of your accounting background, that you got your degree in accounting and then moved into real estate, how those two relate. And so as we talk about just being a working mom, you're running your household, but you're also helping run your business, and then you're interacting with your husband, who's obviously running the learning aspect of the household and day to day with the boys. So talk about what kind of different things that you deal with that maybe others may not.
So with my brokerage, we really focus on referral-based business. They have all of us go through the Buffini referral maker program. And so with that, I also did Dave Ramsey at the same time when I first started in real estate. So from day one, we basically cashed out the Oppenheimer fund that my grandparents had left me. We cashed that out to last until I had my first closings. And so we've always had to budget since we were med school spouse living off of student loans to now, okay, we're a real estate family. So with my accounting background, we actually do a budget meeting every month, my husband and I. Typically that's our date night for the beginning of the month is budget meeting. And literally we're that couple at Chili's that has the laptop out and has all this, like the spreadsheets printed out. But we go through it because it's really important that even though I'm the one making the funds, that my husband has a big say in what we're doing with it. Any kind of big marketing, advertising things, we run it by him, and it's, well, let's look at the data. Did that have a good ROI? Is it worth it? Should we be focusing on something else? And I feel like, especially because I was 25 when I got my license, and look young, like all the other 30 under 30s, it helps with credibility. The fact that I was able to explain to them that I had a undergrad in accounting with honors. So I have that financial background.
Well, I love the Dave Ramsey program so much that I was a Financial Peace University coordinator for about a year and a half. I actually have everyone on my team go through Financial Peace University or go to a Dave Ramsey event, because I kind of feel like, hey, if we're going to be compensating you with a salary, and even some of our independent contractors have gone through this program, we want to make sure that they're good stewards of the resources that that they're getting in their salary and in their income. And so I think it's a phenomenal program. And you're right, whether it's a stay-at-home dad or a stay-at-home mom or two working parents, both partners have a say regardless of who makes more or less. And that's one of the core tenets of the Dave Ramsey program, is that, you know, just because you may be more geared towards accounting, it doesn't mean that your husband doesn't get a say to, you know, hey, this is kind of what we need on a daily basis at the house while you're at work. And I think it's a great message for young couples, and then couples that have been together for a while. It's a good way to kind of dust off, like, hey, are we communicating on a regular basis? And it may seem funny to go to dinner and go over your budget, but it's being intentional with each other. And I have found, my wife and I, since we started doing Financial Peace University together and then continuing with our budgets monthly, I started with them first, and then she's picked them up because she's actually more astute with financials than I am, even though I got my degree in finance. She's just naturally geared that way. She does them now, but it provides this communication with each other, and it's really, really great.
Especially since our income is so fluctuant, it's really important to have a really good basis of, you know, saving. So that way, regardless of what happens on a month-to-month basis, you're still taking care of the first priority, which is the family.
So next question I have is, what things you do to get your day started right? Obviously, you're leaving the house. Your husband and your kids are staying there, and I've always found that that's really tough for me as a parent, regardless of whether you're male or female. That there's just this tension with leaving, and you're like, man, I'm leaving, you know, my family, and I got to go into work. So there's kind of that aspect, but then literally what you do to get ready as you get your family prepared for you to get out the door. What are the things that you do to start your day right?
So I can tell you what I was doing and what I'm working on doing now. So before, I've never been a morning person. I mean, I know most people never call themselves a morning person, but my husband normally wakes up 2 or 3 hours before most of the family. He's always been like that. So normally mine was, alarm goes off 30 minutes before I actually need to leave. I roll out of bed like a bat out of hell, just get dressed and leave. It's a quick goodbyes. That was something that was causing strain. So I've been adjusting, working on reading The Miracle Morning for real estate agents, and working on eliminating the snooze button. I'm a perpetual snoozer. And so I'm working on setting the mindset, moving the alarm clock into the bathroom so that way I'm not just getting right back in bed. And so far that's been working really well. It also just kind of gives some more time in the morning, makes it a little bit more leisurely. With my children specifically, we don't have much of an issue during the morning with me leaving. Normally they just say, is it a mommy day or daddy day? Normally I give my husband at least one day off a week from the kids, and just so he can have a break. And so I'm at home that day, so they just want to know mommy day, daddy day. And then and let them know when I'm going to be home. So I give them that expectation. So it's either I'll be home for bedtime, or I'll be home for dinner time, or I won't be home tonight and I'll see you in the morning. But they have always been really good with that transition, mainly just because they feel really stable and safe with my husband there. And so they don't really seem to care too much, honestly.
Well, I love that you've figured out the way that family needs to work for you, which is important, right? Everybody's got a different way of getting there. And if the end result's the same and you feel good about it, I think that works. And I love that you admitted that you used to do things and it was causing some stress or tension with how you used to have your morning ritual, and you're kind of reprogramming. And the word calibrate is all about iteration and programming to get to a new desired result. Sometimes the way that we've been doing things isn't working anymore. So you got to make some changes. Our buddy, Dave Ramsey, that we both like, will share the famous joke that, if you've been baking a cake for 20 years and it comes out chocolate every time, don't be surprised when it comes out chocolate. You got to change the recipe, right, for it to come out vanilla. So I think that's great. And then you shared with me that you've got a pretty long commute relative to maybe what some of our audience might have. It's about 45 minutes from the town that you live in to get to your office in Fort Worth. So what do you do when you're in your car?
Listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. I really like to ingest information auditorially. That's just how I'm a natural auditory learner. And so typically I'm listening to all different kinds of things. I'll mix in, if I'm just getting too overwhelmed or just burn out with like motivation, real estate stuff, I'll switch to like a nonfiction or a fantasy book or something. But like, for example, yesterday, after doing an open house, showed a house at 5:00, finished up showing up and showing the house, and then called my husband and he said, how long is your commute tonight, or when are you getting home? And I said, I have a 53-minute drive. He's like, okay, I'll see you in about an hour. And that's really normal for us. It's a drag, but it's also caused me to have to give some things up or kind of delegate some of those things. So getting my assistant to deliver more signs, more stuff, and I just structure appointments more on 3-4 days a week instead of every single day having a little bit of stuff. So that way I'm working from home more days than not.
That's great. And I think that you're right that you're forced, as a parent, to drop some things, to delegate them and say, look, I just can't. And what ends up happening is someone picks them up, right? Or you decide that, okay, I figured out that that's really not as important as I thought it was when I was either married with no kids or when I was single. And I know you've been in the real estate industry ever since you've been married with kids, but I have found that my life before, as Amanda DeVito Parle says, and she's the moderator of the panel that you're on, she says, there's life BC, before children, and then life after kids as well. And so I think that's really cool that that you're willing to admit that, things aren't always easy. And I think that realtors, especially successful realtors, a lot of times you see, the shiny, perfect picture that may be on the bus bench or on the billboard or whatever it is. And then you meet that person in person and you realize, okay, they're just a regular, average Jane or Joe. And I think it's really important to be authentic, which leads me into one of my next questions with just authenticity. And, I think being a spouse and then also being a parent, I think it's really important to be true to your authentic self. And I find whenever I have problems, it's because I'm moving away from what is just natural. And so I gather that you're pretty authentic and pretty straightforward person, but has being authentic ever kind of left you in a position where you feel vulnerable as you're trying to maybe balance whether you're going to do a family activity or help a client out? Has that ever been a problem for you?
So typically it has not been a problem. Part of my personality is just the energy, the optimism, which clients really appreciate. One thing that I have had to kind of separate from real estate is like political beliefs and that type of thing. Growing up in Austin, I grew up in a very liberal area. Fort Worth is known as Funky Town for the DFW Metroplex. So it's a little bit more liberal, but it also is the home to Texas Christian University. So it is more Christian, a little bit more conservative than Austin was. Now that I live in a small town of 2,600 people, it's very common to see the Confederate flag on the back of somebody's pickup truck driving down Main Street. And so I've had to just kind of separate and find what commonalities I do have with people rather than just being like, what's wrong with you? And so I have to be a little bit careful on what kind of beliefs I will kind of portray or talk to people about when it comes to real estate. But when it comes to my why for my business, I am very, very open and honest with all my clients. The reason that I work so hard for you is so I can support my family. That's why I focus and have this energy and commitment to my business, is so I can become debt free so I can support my family. And that kind of authenticity has been really helpful.
I love that answer. I mean, it's all about helping support your family and having a better future, right? And being able to make sure that your kids have a different result than maybe you did when you were growing up. And I think that that's what most parents aspire to, is making sure that their kids are taken care of and that they learn and that they can become not only good children, but great adults as they grow up. So,
and that's the thing with the small town where we teach our children about diversity and inclusiveness and loving all. And so like the Confederate flag thing is just a little weird for us still.
Yeah, it can be difficult. And I know that small town and rural, just from my own experience, you feel like at times you're in a pretty small bubble. But when you're obviously going to a major metropolitan area like Fort Worth, and then if it bleeds into Dallas, I mean, you've got a pretty large area too. So you're close enough that I'm sure that they get some culture and they get, outside of their town at times. And I think that with being a parent, it's all about just kind of exposing your kids to as much as possible, and they're going to end up having their own experiences too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we focus on a lot of travel. That's one of the big things with our business, and the fact that my husband homeschools them is we have the leisure to be able to go places. So my 7-year-old, well now he's 8, he's been to 36 of the U.S. states already. We have an RV and we travel a lot with that.
That is so cool. I think I remember you sharing that in Boston when I first met you. And I would love to dig into that a little bit more right now. So having the ability to literally have a rolling, geography lesson, I think is really, really neat. So just talk to me briefly about some of the trips that you've taken and some of the lessons, especially your oldest, Ben, I'd imagine is probably a sieve for information as he's now 8 years old. And then Will's probably coming there too.
Yeah, so we just got back in November. We went to DC. We didn't ride in a vehicle the whole time. We just took the metro or walked. We did at least 6.5 miles every day. But we got a pass to go to the Capitol, got a tour of the Capitol, and then also got to be up in the gallery while the House of Representatives was in session. And an Iowa representative came up and asked if they wanted to go down on the floor. And so we were like, sure. So they actually got to go down while the House of Representatives was in session and shake a bunch of hands and wave at us from down below, that kind of thing, which I was really jealous. I wanted to go down there, but no adults allowed unless you're elected. So, but we, just getting to take them to the history of modern art and the Space Museum, and we do very, very minimal television. And if it is, it's like Mr. Rogers or some type of educational type thing. It's not just junk TV. And so, like our 8-year-old's been to Yellowstone 3 times. He's been so many places. My husband did a road trip all the way to Maine and back in the RV, and it took a month. And so I flew in, spent a week, and then I flew home. It's normally him driving them, and then I fly in.
That is so cool. I mean, what a great way, you think about their experience with being on the floor of the legislature. I mean, what about, civics or social studies? I mean, that's about as perfect of a lesson that you could ever have, as like, here's our government in action, and being able to then just see the country is really cool. And our kids had a healthy diet of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which is a Mr. Rogers derivative, and they absolutely loved it. So that's really cool. One of the things that I heard you say at the beginning of our interview that I want to dive deep on is your company, Century 21 Judge Fight, has 900 agents. And I think it's really, really cool that they involve you in the Buffini program. I don't know Brian Buffini personally, but I listen to his podcast regularly. It's one of my things that I really enjoy. And Brian Buffini had Brian Tracy on his podcast about 2 dozen episodes ago. And Brian Tracy is a famous motivator. If you haven't ever heard of him in our audience as you're listening, Brian Tracy had commented that your vehicle, especially if you're in sales, should be a rolling library. That if you can be intentional about the things that you listen to and the things that you put in your mind, instead of listening to mindless sports talk or political talk or even just your favorite radio, and those things are good in moderation, but you should use that as an opportunity to really learn. And so I think it's great that your company very proactively say, we're going to plug you into the Buffini program. And I'd love to hear some of the things you've learned from Buffini. And then also just the idea of, I would love to hear a few of your favorite audiobooks that you've read or listened to, I should say, recently. And just comment about some of the things that you like to do on your commute.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm fortunate enough that from day one, I was with Century 21 Judge Fight. As a brokerage, they've been around for 80 years. And even though they're so big, they have 25 offices in the DFW Metroplex, so the third biggest Century 21 in the world. They're very accessible. I'm going to be sitting next to my broker, Jim Fight, on an airplane to Cozumel in 2 weeks. They do an all-inclusive trip that you can earn every year. And this is the 11th year they've done that trip. So this is me, my third year. And so I get to spend time one-on-one with my broker, even though we have so many agents. But as a brokerage, they have all of our new agents go through the Brian Buffini program. They actually have us do the 12-week program, and then they take 600 out of your first 6 closings and then give you back an extra 100 out of your next one. So they pay you back for it. But same with Financial Peace University. They actually host it in all of our offices. And so the second that you graduate, through Petty Cash, your regional sales manager will actually pay you back. So as a brokerage, they truly believe in both of those systems. And the thing I like Dave Ramsey and Brian Buffini about is basically focus on the fundamentals. There are so many things in this business with, pay this website, pay this one, and you'll get rich and you'll get a million leads. But it really comes down to the people and the fundamentals. So I don't pay for any online leads. I focus on referrals from my past clients. With the Brian Buffini program, that means calls, notes, and pop-bys to your past people. So I did 74 transactions last year. 31 of those were either repeat clients or referrals from clients. So doing pop-bys to past clients, bringing them items of value, hosting client parties, making calls, checking in, making sure that you're still helping them long after the sale. And that's what's grown the business.
So you had commented that there's a lot of realtors that buy their leads, and there's a lot of tech companies out there that are involved in real estate, and there certainly can be good strategies for doing that. But you're old school, and you do things by referral, and I think you've created a great sphere of influence that's a testament to your production last year that you shared. As a mom and as a realtor, how do you find technology helps you be more efficient just with your day-to-day stuff? Do you have any technology hacks that you like to use, whether it be shopping for stuff, or there any things that you're using that really helps you be as efficient as possible so that you can spend the most amount of time with your kids and your husband?
Absolutely. Yes. So one of the apps that I actually learned from the Boston reunion last year was Wunderlist. It's Wunderlist. It's a free app. I use that multiple times a day as for my business, but also as a family. So with that, you can make checklists and have it shared to multiple people. So if I add something to the grocery list, my husband can see, or vice versa. If I happen to be able to stop at the store on my way home, I can see what he has on the list. And when I start checking them off, then he sees that they've already been purchased. And I use that in my real estate business with the ability to have templates. So I basically created a listing template and a buyer template, and have it enabled to where my assistant can see those too. So I have basically like a coming soon folder, active listing, active buyers. And so we have, a list. We have a form going through what steps need to be taken. So rather than me having to send her a text or an email, say, hey, I need these 4 postcards to go out this week, I need this sign on this yard and this thing this way, I can just assign those tasks. And so rather than her having to respond back and say, okay, that one's done, that one's done, that one's done, she just checks them off the list. I know they're done. I know that she checked them off. So and we can just move forward. And it's a free one, so it's awesome.
And is there an ability to pay for a more updated version of the app, or is it just totally free?
It's totally free from what I know. They have, I use the browser version because the templates are a little bit more robust that way. I mean, I made the templates. It's all just my stuff, but then I use their app to control it from my phone to update. I have it as like a thumbnailed item on my browser, so that way it's always open, just like my email. So I can just go through and coming soon, put a due date, so that way my assistant knows, hey, we've got this house coming soon. I also use Google Drive for all my documents. So once again, I have basically like a master folder for taxes, that kind of thing, where my husband has access to. But then I also have a real estate folder, and my assistant has authorization and access to that set of things. So if I scan in a document about emailing her something, it's already in its folder. And so either of us can pull into that folder. And so if she needs to put a house on the market, she can go through there and go through the data input sheet that I've already uploaded.
That's awesome. I love how you use Wunderlist for both your personal and your professional, right? I mean, you have
Mhm.
the ability to use it in both ways. And then with Google Drive, that's just, you might as well just use one of the most efficient, largest technology companies. And I think that that's great too. And it allows multiple
Yeah.
people to access it and them to see your calendar, I'm sure, is the other benefit.
Mhm.
We use Google Calendars a lot as well.
Yeah, and then also through using the Google Drive app, I can use, there's an app called Cam Scanner. It's just a PDF scanner. You take a picture of it and it converts it into a PDF document, and I can upload it straight into the Google Drive account straight from there. So for example, I'll be on a listing appointment. I'll ask them if I can see their survey. I'll take a picture with the app of their survey, create it into a PDF and put it straight in the folder. So that way I don't need to deal with the paper and it's already in the folder.
Love it. Efficiency at its finest. It's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that what that does is allows you to make sure that you're able to do what's the most important thing, which is connect with your clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can lead a more efficient life at home and at your office, that gives you more face time to do drop-bys, write thank you notes to people. And I love that, especially through Buffini, that you do this kind of old school approach, and it allows people to feel like in our technological world that you're still connected with them and that you're still
Mm-hmm.
very intentional about the time that you spend with them. So um, those are some of the things I've observed, but let's maybe talk about your clients. What are some things that they may have communicated to you at a closing table or just in general that sets you apart from other realtors, and why your clients choose to work with Sarah Lyons at Century 21?
So I had to think about it a little bit on that question. And so I went back and I actually looked at some of my reviews. And one of the things that seems to be a theme is education. So multiple people have said, I really appreciate how she educated me about the process. Nobody explained any of this to me before. She made sure I had a good understanding of what was going to happen and what to expect. So that way, when road bumps happen, I already knew that they were going to be coming. And that's, I guess, one of those things that I truly do a buyer's briefing with every buyer. Upon seeing the first house, I literally get out my laptop and I go through a graph I made of this is the timeline, this is our inspection, appraisal, all of that. And then also what upfront costs they're going to be looking at. So we don't run into where we get a house under contract and then they're like, what do you mean I need $3,000 for earnest money? So that way we have a good understanding from day one. And then same with sellers, for sure.
Yeah, I find that those type of things just really prevent any of the kind of freak out moments that someone would have, is if you can educate them, but also get them into your process and just help them understand that this is the way that we process real estate, and it might be different from others, but I found it to be the most successful. And if you can kind of work on that system, it allows you to do the volume that you're doing. 74 deals, 74 sides is a lot of transactions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're doing 5, 6, 7 transactions a month. And so you've got to be really, really effective in communicating with multiple people at once. And that's great. And you're doing that with a part-time assistant, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she basically just helps with data input, brochures, flyers, putting out signs, that kind of thing. She never interacts with the clients directly. And that's part of my branding and my marketing, is that even though I've been the #1 producer for Century 21 in Fort Worth for 3 years, I'm not going to hand you off. I'm not in a mega team. You're not going to suddenly be dealing with a transaction coordinator, which is really pervasive in our area. There's whole brokerages that's pretty much all they have is, these multiple level teams. And personally, from being the agent on the other side, it's annoying because then I'm trying to figure out who am I actually supposed to talk to, who's in charge here. And so making sure my clients feel comfortable that I have a full understanding of the process and I'm going to be the one walking you through. When you have a problem, it's not who am I supposed to call, it's you call Sarah.
Right. Yeah, I think it's great that you maintain connected to the transaction. And I do think that that is something that is happening all across real estate, whether you're in Texas or Colorado or some other area. And so I think that more and more that you can show that you have that white glove service, that
Mm-hmm.
high attention to the customer, high attention to the client. I think that that's going to end up creating a referral-based business, right? Some people may work with some of the mega teams on their first transaction, but once they see that you've got the level of service and you've got the repeat business, it'll end up, I think, making a much longer sustainable business for you personally. And it's what
Mm-hmm.
works the best for you. I think you've got to sell to the best type of system that will work best for you.
Yeah, when I started and tried to identify what stuff I enjoy in this business, like I have a great friend who's another agent in our office, and he did door knocking sales. So that's what he's used to. He likes going to garage sales and connecting with people. I hate that stuff. I don't do cold calling. I don't do door knocking. My focus is making the relationships I've already built and making sure that those I'm cultivating. And so when I'm doing a pop by, it's not somebody might slam their door in their face. It's someone that they know, they trust me. Their kids call me the candy lady, because I've been consistent with bringing them stuff and making sure that they know that I'm always here for them.
All right, so let's talk about the pop by, because I love this concept, and I do it a little bit. I've become more and more attuned to, I've got to make sure that I'm just stopping by, dropping off something of value. So let's get tangible with some of the things that you actually pop by with. You're called the candy lady, but then also what are some other, I want to see props here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see.
So I'm actually doing peeps right now, things with peeps that say that have your peeps call my peeps. With a, oh, by the way, I'm never too busy for your referral sticker. Typically, if they're not home when I show up, I will take a picture, normally like a selfie with it in front of their door, text it to them and say, hey, I just popped by. You're one of my favorite peeps. Sorry I missed you. I'm never too busy to help any of your friends or family. And I get people posting on Facebook saying thank you. I get texts back and oh, my neighbor actually just talked about wanting to sell, and then gives me the information, that kind of thing. This was one of the Halloween ones that I did. These are hot chocolate stirrers. And so it has the working with you and your referrals is so cool, basically. And then it has my card. And so my goal for this year was to hit 36 per month.
So I'm assuming that you probably just trying to be efficient. If you're doing a showing in a neighborhood, or if you're in a certain spot, you'll pop by the past clients in that neighborhood and touch base.
Pretty much. Yeah. Great. I have a printout in my car, 3-page printout with them kind of sectioned off. So if I'm in Fort Worth proper, then it's one section. If I'm down south in Benbrook or Crowley, then it's a different section. So I have them kind of mapped out. So I kind of know what the general efficient route is for them. And I can hit 4 or 5, 6 just in an hour or so.
I think that's so cool. It's amazing how many people I will speak to just in my own residential neighborhood, but just also about real estate, where we'll be talking and I'll say, hey, this or that, or, what was the realtor that you worked with? And they will sit and scratch their head and go, gosh, I really liked them. They were super nice, but I don't remember. And I think that for you, it's just being top of mind, right? And it's just as simple. They may not like peeps, they may not like pumpkins, they may not like whatever it is, but it's the whole point that you're just like, hey, I was thinking of you, and I'm not going to like awkwardly, if they're not at home, just drop it off and just send a quick text message. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And with it too, it's not just the clients that I sold a house to. If it was my listing, I will adopt that buyer like they were my client too. So working on doing happy house anniversary cards this year. So I basically have a list once again of everybody that's ever purchased or closed, and whether it was my buyer or my seller, I will mail them a card, 2 years ago today or this month, you bought your house, happy house anniversary, and I'll do some scratch offs and say, win some big money so we can buy you the next one, something like that. And
I love both of those. That's awesome.
And it's a $2 scratch off card. And I basically set it up to where I have written and photocopied on our printer at the office, and they're my Brian Buffini cards. And so that way I have them all set up for the month. And that's something that I have my assistant help me with, where here's the list, basically prep them. And that way on the first of the month, then I'll throw all of them in the mail for that month.
The thing that I love about, especially for listing agents, that I heard you say is that you adopt the buyer as if it were your client, because they were involved in the deal and they remember your professionalism. And what I have long said in my career is that most people will choose kind of anybody to work with on the buy side, right? They'll choose their sister or their uncle or their aunt or whatever.
Whoever happened to be in an open house.
Right. Just a friend of a friend, because oftentimes they're just trying to get to buy their first house. But when they sell, the decision-making process of who you choose to sell your house when you're a prospective seller, that realtor is really important. And you want to find someone that's a real expert, someone that's maybe a geographic farmer in your neighborhood. And so I have found oftentimes people will boomerang to me, and it's not like I'm trying to steal people's clients, but I've just stayed in touch, or they've seen our marketing collateral and they feel like, gosh, this is really, really cool stuff. So I think that's great that you just put them into the hopper in addition to your other client that you may have worked with. The other thing I really like about that whole process is just that you have a real system to it. A lot of people know and want to do these things, and they'll do them for 30 days or 60 days, and then they'll kind of fall off as they get busy. You've got, hey, we're lined up in the month. This is exactly what we're going to do for everybody's house anniversary. But then also here are the sections of town that I know I'm going to be in. And so you make sure that you can be successful by really condensing some of these things so that it makes your life easier.
And that was part of my business plan for 2018, was writing out, what things I want to be more consistent with, because I struggle with consistency. Oh, I made a phone call, now I need to send them a card. It's really hard. And then if this job was easy, everybody would do it. But setting up the systems when it comes to like the house anniversary cards, I basically had it ready for the first quarter of the year at the beginning of January. Have the system ready. I have a little box with all the stuff that it's needed for that project. So that way it's easy to not do it. Or easy to do it. It's not, a hassle. Just sit down and set them out. Same with like mail outs. I tend to pick a project and stick with it for a longer duration versus doing a little bit every single day. So I'll do a mail out to 600 homes within a 2-day period and just knock them out.
Yeah, it's focus, and focus creates, like if you think of the old, I've heard a lot of speakers use this analogy, but you think about the magnifying glass, right? The power of focus. You can burn a leaf if you point the magnifying glass the right way and use the sun's light, it creates fire. And so that focus can make water cut steel if you position it the right way. And so I think that it's really important to just focus in on something, get it done, do it in mass, and then use that to follow through, because it is difficult to stay consistent if you're not batching activities together.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that they're a multitasker, but what ends up happening is you do a few things and then get distracted. And it sounds like you're maybe a lot like me. It's important to make sure that you batch those activities, get it all done, and then that way you can move on.
Yeah, lots of checklists, so that way I can remember what stuff I need to come back to.
All right. So you've had a really successful career, and I know that success doesn't come without its share of failures, right? A lot of times I look at my own successes. I'm standing on a mountain of failure, or I'm a success despite my failures. And so how do you handle that? I know that you're mostly a solo agent with a part-time assistant, but how do you deal with something that doesn't go the way that you planned? What are some things you do to maybe get over that? And is there any kind of like memorable bad situation and how you got through it in your career?
So I was writing down, trying to answer that question. And I think that it just happened to happen. So that way I'd have a great answer. But I literally had a deal fall apart yesterday that would have been a triple transaction. It was going to be my buyer, my seller. My seller was purchasing a new construction home that just happened to be 6% commission on it. So it was altogether like a $42,000 transaction in commission for me. And it fell apart last night. And I was like, so I posted on Facebook, which I very rarely post anything negative on Facebook. I'm naturally an optimist anyway, but I'm always half glass half full. There you go. But I really just had to dig deep and just trust that there was a plan, there was a reason. But through all of it, whether it's a hairy transaction with a buyer's agent or like in this situation, gratitude and respect. It was my buyer and my seller not being able to come to an agreement. And through all of it, it was buyer wishing seller best wishes and vice versa. And let me know if there's anything I can do to help. They're welcome to have my inspection reports, that kind of thing. And so just always giving people the perspective of the other person and just calling them out. If it's, honestly, I don't think that that's a reasonable request. And this is why, take it from their perspective. But in the end of it, even though I just lost out on $42,000 in commission, and the seller can't sell their house for 3 years now, I still have positive relationships with all parties. They still, say that they will be referring me to their friends and family and that they'll still be using me whenever they do need to purchase or buy. But it's just one of those things where I have money in savings and I hadn't spent that money yet. I was thinking about what I was going to use it for, but I hadn't spent it.
Yep. You got to have that rainy day fund, that emergency fund, that retained
Mhm.
earnings account, if you're going to use an accounting term. And
Mhm.
gosh, that stinks. I mean, and that's about as, that's just a surface level thought process. I mean, that really, really probably hurts to have something. And I've had
Yeah.
situations like that where a big deal that you've been working on for a long time just crashes and burns. And
Mhm.
there's really nothing that you can do about it,
Mhm.
except for look for the positive in it. Hopefully, you served everybody well enough that they're going to come back to you and want to do business. And it's a message out there for anybody that just assumes that real estate's just a cinch, right? I mean, we have these
Mhm.
just punch in the gut moments that are just really, really difficult. But I have found that, like a lot of championship teams and high achievers, whether it's in athletics or in business, that we often forget about our wins pretty easily, and we dwell on those losses. And I think, if I can coach you for a second, and not that you need it, but I've found that that whenever I have situations like that, the best thing I can do is do one of those pop-bys, see a client that I have served really well and been successful with, and say hi to them. And just there, I find being an outgoing, optimistic person, when I'm around someone else, you kind of forget
Mhm.
and don't dwell as much on what might be going on between your ears, in your head, from that last transaction that didn't work out. So I've always found, and I tend to be a people person, that if I can get back out and say hi to some of my other clients, or get working on another project, that usually helps me kind of move past it. But it is difficult
Yeah.
for sure.
And that's exactly what I did. I had a listing appointment this morning right before our call,
Perfect.
for a past client, and that's the lady that told me her daughter calls me the candy lady. So, and I helped her and her husband 3 years ago to buy a house, and consistently brought them pop-bys, and it wasn't a question who they were going to sell their house to. Um,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, I
So,
would.
rounding out our interview, I love to end with this question, and it's based on a presentation that I do. It's also based on a song that I really enjoy, and it's this idea of "Dear Younger Me." You're writing yourself a letter, or you're writing someone a letter that is younger than you, and
Mhm.
based on some of those failures that we talked about, some of those things that maybe didn't work out as well. What advice would you give to that 22-year-old? It's the advice you wish you knew when you were 22. And what would you share with someone?
Uh, Building consistency. So right now I have struggled with being consistent with my CRM. So while I've been pretty good with, like, I have the list to do the pop-bys, it's hard for me to set up a system to be constantly adding the new people. Because some days there will be 4 or 5 people that have called in that might be a potential seller in the future, and setting up that consistent schedule of I add them at this time every day, and all of that. So it's just that setting up the system so you're consistent from day one, that I really still struggle with, and I wish I would have started it at the beginning, because I'm still trying to catch up to some of the people that I missed out on in the meantime. And then also setting those routines when it comes to the mornings. As a non-morning person, I don't start my business typically till like 9:30 or 10 in the morning. I'll go work out at like 8:30 or 9, and then I'm finally getting into real estate by that time. And I tend to work until like 1 o'clock in the morning. And so from day one, I wish I would have kind of shifted my business to just make a better work-life balance, and keep the focus on the family time. And so that stuff that with the Miracle Morning I'm working on right now is structuring more of the family time.
Well, I think that that's just an act in intentionality, right? It's the same thing with doing a budget. It's the same thing with having a business plan. As corny and maybe as calculated as it sounds, you need to have a plan for your family, right? You need to have a plan for how you're going to spend one of the most precious resources, which is not money, it's time. You know, we all have a finite amount of time.
Time.
Every single one of us has the same amount of hours in a day, and you get to choose how you get to use those. And I think it's wonderful that in the real estate industry we have this flexibility. But the flip side of that coin, there's always the other side of the coin, is that sometimes it just never seems like it stops. And I've found that turning your phone on do not disturb or turning it off for an hour. I've had a couple of interviews that I've done with other 30 under 30 honorees where they say, look, my phone is off until 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, so that I don't get that random text message. Because I think people are a lot more, and you probably see this with some of your friends that are parents, we start seeing text messages ping in at about 7 a.m. just with people coordinating stuff, whether it's carpools or whatever that's going on. And I think that text messaging has a way of kind of infiltrating your life more so than the phone does early in the morning. So there's a lot of different ways that you can time block so that you appropriately allow your family some space. And I think it's great that you've understood that, look, this is just the way I'm naturally wired. And the way that you need to get work done is, for you might work till 1 a.m. I can't do that. I've got to wake up. I woke up today at 4 and I'm up and I'm getting ready and I'm off to work at 5, but that's how I'm geared. I am passing out by 8 o'clock tonight because I've been going for a long time. So just knowing how you're naturally wired. And I don't believe that there is one way that's the right way to do it. I think it's making sure that you can find the time to get some quiet, focused attention to the task that you need to take care of.
Yeah. And we do some time blocking. So like dinner time, my phone is never at the dinner table. I leave it in a completely different room. I have my Fitbit set to like do not disturb because it stresses me out to even have it vibrating at me just normally. And then also my boys and I have coveted bedtime. Normally bedtime routine is mine, and we're on book 5 of Harry Potter. So that's what we do in the nighttime. Is my phone's not with me. I'm up in their room and we're reading for about an hour every night.
I think that's so cool. I heard you say that in our last discussion as we were preparing for this panel that you're going to be on in a few weeks. And I started reading Harry Potter to my kids, and they loved it. They loved it so much that we've already blasted through like 3 or 4 of the movies, which just spoils the experience. It's hard,
Yeah, we're hypersensitive to like movie type stuff, and so they've only been able to watch movie 1, but we're on book 5.
That's great.
So my husband is reading them The Hobbit. I'm reading Harry Potter, and then my mother-in-law is reading some dragon book. So
that's cool.
We're constantly reading to them.
It's amazing. It's so interesting. You think, man, this is a pretty, it can be tedious. They're thick books, and you're like, man, I don't know if they're really just going to attach or resonate with it. And they do. They're like, can you read to us? It's amazing.
When you have a kid as the main character, how can they not
exactly
resonate with it? So
it's so cool.
And then we found, these are my books from when I was a kid, when I read these books and my parents read them to me. And there was a bookmark, and it's a bookmark that I made, like that said the Goblet of Fire back on. And it was made out of some of my dad's old business cards that I made. And so it's really cool using the same bookmark that I made as a kid.
That's cool. It's very nostalgic, and the kids see it, and it's just, that's really, really neat. Well, I appreciate you being my guest. I get a gift for all of my guests, and I mentioned this briefly when we got started, but I'm actually going to give you a copy of the book EntreLeadership by Dave Ramsey.
Oh, awesome.
Now, I know that you love consuming things audibly, so I'm probably actually going to send you the Audible version as well, because it's a phenomenal book. And as you know, Dave is all about fundamentals. This is his book about how he built his business. So Financial Peace University is kind of the consumer product that has been literally taught to over, I think it's up to 5 million people now that have gone through the class. And it's been taught at one point in 40,000 different churches and community centers. But this is how he started his business, from going bankruptcy to now being a multi bestseller of books, as well as having that class and obviously his radio show as well. So awesome. I think you'll like it. I love it. It's a very, very quick read.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I'm working on The Greatest Salesman in the World right now. That's the one I'm actually like reading paper copy, but it always takes me a lot longer to paper read them. I normally just listen to them.
That's cool. Is that Og Mandino?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal book. It's really, really cool. Actually, Brian Buffini's latest podcast that I just listened to has Brian Buffini, reading the Og Mandino 10 scrolls that are in that book. So you probably don't want to listen to it until you've read the full.
Yeah, don't ruin it.
That's a phenomenal book. And that's, at that time, I think he sold something like 40 million copies of that book. It's pretty incredible story, Og Mandino. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast. I love just chatting about real estate and getting an idea of how real estate success is really made. It's intentional. And so Sarah Lyons from Century 21 in Fort Worth, I really appreciate it. For all of our listeners and people that are watching watching on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Make sure to check us out on iTunes and YouTube, and please do leave a review. For Sarah Lyons, I'm Kyle Malnati. This is the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast, and we will see you around the neighborhood. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.